Now that you know a little bit about our MFS and MFD mobile filtration systems with available Hytrax manual fluid sampling systems, we will show you in 9 easy steps how you can add the Hytrax to your already existing system. As a note, this segment is only needed if you wish to purchase the retrofit option for an already existing system. You can also order brand new systems with this option already installed for you. To start, you will want to make sure that you have all the following items: a large straight slot screwdriver, small straight slot screwdriver, 8-inch wire ties, tape measure, wire cutters, 7/16 inch, ½ inch, and 9/16 inch wrenches, 2 large crescent wrenches, small crescent wrench. Once you have these items gathered, we can begin. Step 1. We will start by removing the filter cart suction hose from the intake strainer. To do this, we'll remove the 2 9/16 inch bolts that connect the motor to the pump. Both bolts are located directly underneath the AC motor shown here. Access is tight on the forward mounting bolts. You will have to go from each side of the cart to fully loosen these bolts. An overhead lifting hoist can be used to raise the middle handle motor assembly. If a lift is not available, you will need 2 additional people to slightly lift the assembly to remove the forward bolt completely. Once the bolts are removed, you can detach the suction hose and set the handle motor assembly aside. Remember this step, as we will have to reinstall the suction hose at the end of the retrofit process. Step 2. We will then install the 2 fittings and 2 hoses into the manifold as shown here. As a note, do not fully tighten the fittings into the manifold at this time. Once the fittings are loosely tightened, we can then tighten the hoses onto said fittings. When looking at the cart from the rear, the short hose, which is a TCM suction hose, attaches on the right-hand side. This hose will connect to the fittings closest to the cart pump and away from the filters. The long hose, which is a TCM discharge hose, will attach to the fittings closest to the filters on the left-hand side. Step 3. We'll then remove the 4 bolts holding the AC motor to the handle assembly. You may discard the bolts once removed. Now that the AC motor is off, we can now attach the Hytrax bracket to the handle assembly. Just carefully line up with the 4 holes. Then we will grab the AC motor and place on top of the newly installed Hytrax bracket. Make sure this lines up with all 4 holes. The bolts included with the set can then be placed through the motor, Hytrax mount, and then mounted through the original motor mount plate. You should now have your original handle assembly, the new Hytrax bracket, and AC motor all connected. Check to make sure the motor is straight in reference to the cart handle. Step 4. We are now ready to install the overall handle assembly back onto the cart. During the installation, make certain that both sample hoses are routed through the top left opening on the Hytrax bracket and towards the backside of the system closest to the motor. Carefully align the motor shaft key with the pump shaft and key. The forward bolt will need to be started before setting the motor fully into the keyway. Tighten both the motor and the coupling bolts using a 9/16 inch wrench. Align the hose fittings so the hoses do not rub on the motor or the bracket. You may now tighten the newly installed manifold fittings using a 9/16 inch wrench. Connect the short TCM suction hose to the bottom port of the Hytrax manifold and the longer TCM discharge hose to the top port. Step 5. Cart motor power cable can now either plug into the newly installed Hytrax control panel or wire directly into the control panel. If you are not wiring directly into the motor, you may skip Step 6. Step 6. We now need to shorten the existing AC motor cable. Measure 60 inches from the motor and then cut the cable. Strip the sheathing to expose 6 inches of wires and strip the ends. Route the power cables down under between motor and bracket as shown here, and back to the control panel as shown here. 110 VAC wire connections are shown here. Step 7. Feed the yellow sampling pump cable and black TCM power cable from the controller through the 1.5 inch hole in the bracket. Connect the sampling pump and the TCM power cords. Pay careful attention to align the tabs in the M12 connectors while making connections. We will then secure the cable and hoses with wire ties and reinstall the suction hose that we removed in Step 1. The kit comes with 2 push-button bleed fittings. Unscrew the bleed fitting located on each filter cap and install said fittings. Step 8. You are now ready to operate your cart. Please fully read the user's manual before operating your new Hytrex filter cart. To operate, place the wand into a reservoir and power up the cart using the switch mounted to the motor. Bleed the filter housing of air and allow the cart to operate for 5 minutes. Check each fitting for leaks and tighten if leaks are noticed. Step 9. After 5 minutes of the main pump operating, the Hytrex can be powered on using the switch manifold to the control panel. The pressure gauge mounted to the Hytrex manifold should rise to approximately 80 to 100 psi. To verify flow rates, press the right arrow key until the TCM flow light is activated under the flow setting. Confirm flow rate is OK- or OK. The flow control valve located on the Hytrex manifold can be adjusted to obtain an OK- flow rate reading. Counterclockwise adjustment lowers flow rate. Clockwise adjustment raises the flow. Once flow rates are set to OK-, scroll left to visually see current ISO code readings.